The courtroom was unusually tense that morning. You could feel it in the air, thick, unspoken, like a storm that hadn't yet broken. People whispered, eyes darted, and the rustle of paperwork felt louder than usual. Everyone sensed something was off. But no one expected what would happen next. A black woman stood quietly near the front of the courtroom, her posture calm, composed, maybe even a little too still. Her deep brown eyes scanned the room, not with fear, but with a cautious sort of wisdom. She wore a simple navy suit and low heels, no jewelry, no makeup, nothing flashy. Just the kind of woman who didn't need to raise her voice to be noticed. Her name was Michelle Carter. She hadn't spoken much since arriving. She hadn't needed to. The murmurs around the room weren't about her case. No one even knew what it was. They were about her presence. Something about her made people sit straighter, as if they knew she didn't belong there. Or maybe that she belonged in a very different way. But then, as the judge glanced down at the docket and called her name, something unexpected happened. One of the police officers in the courtroom, broad-chested, impatient, and with a smirk, he didn't bother to hide, moved toward Michelle with a level of force that drew instant gasps. His name was Officer Kyle Dempsey. Known around the precinct for being tough on so-called attitude, he had a record that was never quite clean, but never quite dirty enough for consequences. He didn't know who Michelle was. To him, she was just another black woman taking up space in his courtroom. He barked at her to step forward more quickly. She didn't rush. That's when it escalated. Without warning, Officer Dempsey grabbed Michelle's wrist with force. She didn't resist, just looked him directly in the eye with a stare that somehow made him blink first. But still, he pushed her forward roughly. Another officer stepped in, muttering something about her cooperation. A third one flanked her side, as though they expected a fight. Michelle didn't raise a hand, didn't flinch. But something about her calm only made them angrier. Then, it happened. The push turned into a shove. The shove turned into something else. A blow. Not once. Not twice. The courtroom gasped as Officer Dempsey struck Michelle hard enough to send her staggering. A thud echoed off the wooden benches. Someone shouted. Phones came out. The judge slammed the gavel but didn't intervene. And Michelle? She stood back up slowly, deliberately. Not shaken, not broken, but with a kind of resolve that made the entire courtroom go quiet. She reached into the pocket of her blazer, carefully, slowly, like she'd practiced it in a mirror, and pulled out a thin silver badge. She said nothing, just held it in her hand, calmly. The room froze. The badge shimmered slightly under the courtroom lights. It was real, not some cheap trinket, not a prop, a federal seal. Engraved letters, a level of authority none of them were. Ready for. Officer Dempsey stepped back, his jaw twitching. The other officers went stiff. A murmur rippled through the room. One voice whispered, "She's a federal judge." Another said, "That's DOJ." But no one really knew. No one was sure who Michelle really was. Only one thing was clear. They had just made a terrible mistake. But before anyone could speak, before Michelle could utter a word, the courtroom doors burst open and a man in a gray suit rushed in. His tie was slightly askew, but his face was all business. He looked at Michelle, then at the officers, then straight to the judge. "We need to clear this courtroom. Now." Everyone turned, but just as the officers tried to gather themselves and the judge hesitated, the sound of a phone buzzed on the prosecutor's table. A sharp tone followed by a trembling hand lifting it to read the incoming message. The attorney's face turned pale. He looked up, eyes wide, then turned toward Michelle. I didn't realize," he stammered. Michelle finally spoke, her voice cool, even, but heavy with authority. "You didn't ask." And just like that, the tone in the room shifted. People who had been whispering about her just moments before were now shrinking back into their seats. The officers looked down, unsure of what to do with their hands. The judge, suddenly sweating, asked Michelle if she wanted a recess, perhaps time to regroup. But she shook her head. "I'm fine," she said simply. And she was. But nothing in that courtroom would be fine again. A few weeks earlier, on a city bus halfway across town, a young black teenager had just made a quiet decision that would set another unexpected story into motion. His name was Elijah, just 17. He was headed home from school, hoodie half-zipped, earbuds in, backpack sagging off one shoulder. The bus was crowded, not packed, but enough that people were standing. Elijah had a seat near the window. He was half dozing when he noticed a pregnant white woman step aboard, clutching a tote bag and looking around for a place to sit. No one moved. Elijah didn't think twice. He pulled his earbuds out, stood up, and motioned for her to take his seat. She looked surprised, maybe even hesitant, but smiled gratefully and sat down. "Thank you," she said genuinely. "No problem," Elijah replied, already moving toward the back to stand. But just before the next stop, she turned toward him again. Her face was thoughtful now. She rummaged in her bag and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "Can you take this?" she asked quietly. He blinked. "What is it?" "Just something I want you to read," she said. "Later, when you're alone." Confused, Elijah took the note. It felt heavier than paper should. He stuffed it into his jacket pocket, not thinking much of it, until hours later when he finally unfolded it and read the first line. And then his world changed. 2 stories, 2 strangers, 2 moments that seemed small, until they weren't. A courtroom, a bus ride, a black woman in power who kept her silence until it mattered, a black teen whose kindness sparked something he never could have imagined, and a connection between them that no one saw coming. What did that badge really mean? Why did the man in the suit know Michelle by name? What was in the note the pregnant woman gave Elijah, and how could it change everything? The answers are coming, but first you need to know what happened next, and believe me, you're not ready for it. Elijah stared at the piece of paper like it had come from another planet. It was creased from his jacket pocket, a little wrinkled, but the handwriting was neat, almost too perfect. Like it had been written with care, not rushed or scribbled on a whim. He was sitting on the edge of his bed, the note resting in his hands under the dim light of his desk lamp. Outside, sirens whined in the distance, normal background noise, for his neighborhood. His little sister was asleep in the next room, and his mom was still working a double shift at the hospital. The first line of the note read, "You have no idea how important that small act of kindness was today." He blinked, read it again, then kept going. "I know this is going to sound strange, but I've been watching people for a long time. Not in a creepy way, I mean, in my work. I study how people treat others when they think no one's watching. And what you did today? That wasn't small. That was powerful." Elijah frowned. He could still picture the woman's face. She'd looked tired, but kind. Her eyes were sharp, though, like she noticed more than she let on. The note went on. "I want to offer you something, but not yet. First, I need to see what you do next." What did that even mean? He flipped the note over, but that was it. No signature, no phone number, just those carefully written lines. It didn't feel like a prank. It felt real. He tucked the note back into his jacket and lay on his bed, staring at the ceiling. Something about it wouldn't let go. Across the city, Michelle Carter sat alone in a quiet office lit by one standing lamp and the soft glow of a laptop screen. The courtroom incident had happened just hours earlier, but already calls were coming in. Emails, requests for statements, urgent messages from officials who suddenly remembered her number. But Michelle wasn't answering any of them. Not yet. She was thinking about the boy, the one from the bus. She'd watched the security footage a dozen times, thanks to a contact at the city's transportation department. She'd seen the exact moment Elijah stood up, without hesitation, and offered his seat. Not for attention, not for reward, just because it was the right thing to do. Most people overlook things like that. But Michelle, she had spent years watching behavior, especially quiet, honest behavior. She reached for a manila folder on her desk and pulled out a thin file. Elijah Thompson, age 17, lives with his mother and little sister. No father listed. School attendance, spotty but not failing. GPA, decent considering the school's underfunded system. No criminal record, no behavioral flags, but it wasn't the stats that interested her. It was the look in his eyes, that calm kind of strength she'd seen it before in herself. Michelle knew what it meant to grow up with people always looking past you, assuming you didn't matter. That kind of quiet resilience didn't come from nowhere. It was forged, and she had plans for Elijah, big ones. But timing mattered. Trust mattered. She couldn't swoop in and change his world overnight. She needed to let him take the next step. She leaned back in her chair, her fingers steepled in front of her lips. Somewhere out there, he was probably reading the note right now. She wondered how long it would take before he found the second one. Meanwhile, Officer Kyle Dempsey was trying to control the damage. He sat in the back of a dimly lit bar, his phone face down on the sticky table, a half-empty glass in front of him. His buddies from the department weren't returning his texts. His supervisor had told him to take unofficial leave, which was code for, "We're trying to decide if you're worth defending." He'd thought Michelle Carter was just another defendant, some arrogant woman trying to act above the law. He hadn't recognized her. How could he? She didn't carry herself like someone who needed to show off. And now, he was in trouble. Big trouble. There were witnesses. Video clips. That badge. And worst of all, rumors. People were whispering about who she really was. Some said she was FBI. Others said Department of Justice. One rumor even claimed she was being groomed for a federal judgeship and that her position was so protected, even the mayor had to tread carefully. Kyle rubbed his temples and cursed under his breath. He wasn't worried about losing his badge. Not yet. He was worried about what Michelle might do next. But what he didn't know was this. It wasn't Michelle he needed to fear. It was the people behind her. The ones who had been waiting for a reason to expose the rot. The ones who were just looking for a spark to light the fire. Elijah didn't sleep much that night. He kept checking his phone, even though he wasn't sure why. Around 2 a.m., he finally dozed off. When he woke up, there was a second note, tucked inside his backpack. He stared at it in disbelief. It wasn't there the night before. He was sure of it. His hands trembled a little as he opened it. You're being watched, but not in a bad way. In a chosen way. His chest tightened. The note continued. Most people walk through the world, never realizing they're standing at the edge of something bigger. You, Elijah, are standing at that edge, and soon you'll have to choose whether to step forward or turn away. He read the last line twice. The world doesn't change with noise. It changes with action, quiet, deliberate action. I saw what you did. I know who you can be. Just wait. You'll understand soon. Elijah's heartbeat raced. What was this? A game? A test? He wanted to ignore it, pretend none of it mattered. But deep down, something told him this was real. And he wasn't ready to ignore it. He grabbed his hoodie, stuffed the note in his pocket, and walked out the door. He didn't know where he was going, but someone, somewhere, already knew he was coming. And the world he was walking into was nothing like the one he was leaving behind.